On this one here, it says a physics class has to design a low friction slide that will launch a block horizontally from the top of a table. Teams 1 and 2 design their slides as shown above, use identical blocks, 1 and 2 respectively. Both slide at the same height, d, above the tabletop. So if you look here, this distance d is the same as this distance d here. To compensate for a lower table, however, Team 2 constructs the right end of the slide to rise above the tabletop so that the block leaves the slide horizontally at the same height h. So they drop the same distance to the table, d here and here, but they make theirs rise back up because table 2 was lower, so that they both launch from h. So both blocks are released at the top of the respective slides. So do blocks in 1, 2 land the same distance apart here. So both blocks are released. Do blocks 1 and 2 land the same distance from their respective tables there, and justify why. So what you need to do here is 1 point is basically some sort of conservation of energy. So if you do some sort of conservation of energy to argue that there's a couple different ways you could say it, that, oh, well, here your distance d that you drop is the full d. So you've got more kinetic energy in this case. Here you actually rise up, so your distance here is not actually totally d. It is your distance from here to here is less than the full d. So you're going to have less kinetic energy here. So you want to mention therefore that you will have less velocity on slide 2. That's the second point there. There's another way you could get here. You could just say like, oh, well, block 2 will have the same speed when it gets to the tabletop, but then it will you can just say it. It will slow down as it starts to rise up there, so it will have less velocity. But some way of getting the first 2 points. So most people then just say like, oh, well, less velocity means it won't go as far. But they explicitly say this in the scoring guide here. You need to remember, be very litigious and argue every single point. To get that third point, you need to emphasize, like, sure, the velocity is less, but you also have to explicitly say they leave from the same height. Because even though this one has less velocity, if it launched from a higher up, it could still wind up going the same distance, if not farther. So it's very important. You got to say everything that's the same. You got to emphasize that it's the same. So less velocity on team 2, but same height means it won't go as far. And that's why most people only got 2 out of the 3 points on that one. So we come over here to this new situation. This time they have the same table height above the ground. They drop the same distance. The only difference here is the shape of the slide. But here, which one will land farthest from the table, they'll land the same. And it's basically the exact same argument we said before. You want to do some sort of conservation of energy, saying like, well, they started from the same height, so they'll have the same potential. That will go to kinetic. So that basically means the same velocity. And that's basically point 2. Here, for whatever reason, on the scoring guide on this one, they did not make you a second time explicitly state that the height's the same. That they leave from there. Maybe because they already dinged you on it one time, they didn't want to do it a second time. And then the last one I made a bonus. It says which one will hit the ground first. So even though they're going to leave with the same velocity at the end of the table, block 1 will get there first because it will accelerate more quickly to begin with. They'll get there with the same speed. Sort of think about it like this. If you tip the block right off the bat there, the back there, it would get to that tabletop going the same speed v, but it would do it a lot faster than if you let it slide down the slide there. So conservation of energy dictates that they all get to the same speed v when there's no friction when they get to the tabletop, but it might not take the same amount of time to get it. You can imagine if I set up a ramp from here to here, slowly it would pick up speed so that by the time it got to the bottom it would still be going speed v, but it would just take longer. So which one hits the ground first? Block 1 will get to the table first, so we'll launch first, so we'll hit the ground first, and that's where the bonus point comes from.